Oh, yeah. Time check. What do we got? Omar, you hear me, man? All right, man. You look like $1,000,000.
Thank you. I feel like $1,000,000.
Oh, that's what we like to hear. Huh? It's a good look. It's a good look. All right, good. We got sound coming back and forth. These guys got everything else worked out. What's our time check, someone? 12:41. All right, so we got 4 minutes. That's cool. That's cool. All right, and Doug, you're all good. You got everything worked out with images? Yeah? Diener, you're good? All right, they're just working out the last part of the stream. It's a pretty shaky start to that crew call, but whatever. We're good. We're good either way. Hello, everyone. I'm back. I'm Joe Gilderson with Corporate Audio Visual Services. We are live at Pirate University. Everyone, can I hear Pirate University? Excellent, excellent. It's an awesome group, awesome team, and we've got a special guest star for our 12:45 Eastern Standard Time program, which is going to be on Midi software. And this other gentleman in the screen with me here is Omar Colom, founder of AV Educate and about 100 other things, but that's beside the point. Omar, why don't you tell these guys what you do most of your days?
So I'm also the National Director of Education for Evolve Technology. So I train this again on the higher end levels for media server operators, screen switcher operators, and video switcher, camera operating, camera shading, you name it in the video department, I train it at some level or another. And then through AV Educate, we train kind of that stage hand to technician level. So again, giving you those stepping stones to get up to that engineer level is what I do. So I've created a market for myself where I try to help guys get from, greens all the way to professionals in a couple of months or years, depending on how fast they can get their hands on hands-on training and how much experience they get in the field. Because in this industry, you have to have both. You can't have one or the other. So I try to do my best to get back to the community as much as I can, and continue to do that with everything I do, including being here. Right?
Well, yeah, I think you guys can see why we're aligned with Omar and with AV Educate. And we just got to meet the team down at Evolve where he works. Omar, where are you located right now, by the way?
I'm at home in Orlando, Florida.
Of course, a hurricane just passed through his house like yesterday afternoon. But look, he's in good spirits. He's a professional. He was prepared. But Omar, we appreciate it. And just like you said, he's done everything from every level, every breakout room, every highest end projector, every LED wall, but also every stage and drape and run the cables and run the audio. And he's done it all at some point. And that's why he's here. But he believes in helping educate others. And that's why he's founded AV Educate. He spends all day doing training, but high-level training. So I think he's downplaying it. The equipment that he usually does the training on is very high level. So we are very happy to have you here. We appreciate all your time. And look, they don't want to hear from me anymore, and I don't even want to hear from you anymore. So, Omar, I'm going to let you take it away, and why don't you take us through MIDI?
Yeah, so before we dive into the MIDI itself, I got two things to show everybody. We're going to go through a PowerPoint very quickly, and after that PowerPoint, we're going to go into actually the hands-on portion of it. So unfortunately, I see no laptops in the audience right now, so if you guys have a Mac, I suggest you pull it out, because in about 10, 15, 20 minutes, I'll ask you to download the software if you want to follow along. If not, you can follow me along on here. But we'll go over the general stuff. So the idea today is to kind of give you an understanding of what a playback operator is and the importance of that position. A lot of times on show site, I feel guys get kind of sidetracked with responsibilities or don't feel like they're in a key role. And to be honest, playback operator is an essential role for a lot of different reasons. But so let's go over is media coordination. And what that means is ingesting the content, verifying the content, and checking it out. Make sure that it matches verbally to what the producers are going to call, or he's going to call, to what you have on file. That's part of what media coordinator does in a playback position. And this goes across to live events, broadcast, sports. This is not just for corporate AV or corporate events, but just in general, this is some of the tasks you want to be aware of when you're doing this. Another thing is seamless transitions. So making sure that the start time and the end time doesn't have a fade, doesn't cut in properly. Is there an extended fade out for the audio? These are things you want to do in the back end to check to make sure the video you're getting from your clients actually makes sense to what you're going to do on the live side. Sometimes that cutoff for the video will cut off early, and then it'll play through on the other end on a black side. And maybe they don't want to see that, and it was just an editing purpose. Your job is to verify what that is. The next thing would be timing and synchronization. We'll go over this a little bit with MIDI. MIDI has a proprietary version of timecode, and also does regular timecode as well. So there's two different ways to do this, and we'll dive into that a little bit, but not too much. Unfortunately, I don't have everything to show that, but I'll give you the explanations of what those are and what they're doing. The next thing you want to think about, too, when you're on job site and setting up is technical setup. So ideally, you want to have a primary machine and a backup machine. And yes, MIDI does do primary and backup, or director and actor. That is a way you can set this up, and we'll dive into that a little bit, and we'll talk about that when we get into the hands-on portion. Another thing to think about is troubleshooting. What are some scenarios you're going to run into that you want to be able to solve ahead of time? So one of the biggest ones you see a lot of times is when you're plugging into a screen switcher or a video switcher, for example, there might be some discrepancies between resolutions and aspect ratios. And those are things you can solve on your end a little bit, and we'll get into some of the ways to solve that with the geometry properties here. And then we'll talk about some basics about just signal flow in general when it comes to 1080 or 4K, for example. Another thing we'll go down to is communicating with your team. And this is very, very important when it comes to what we do in the industry, because being able to call out that time, that TRT, total runtime, when you first start the show is very, very important to the crew. And also being able to call that 30, 20, 10, and then the countdown from 10 down is really crucial, because your countdown is the key for the entire show to transition to the next thing. So the example would be a CEO comes on the stage, the CEO has a cue of a video, let's say, first, and then the CEO comes on stage to talk. That countdown at the end from that 10 to 0 is very, very important for everybody to be on the right cue, for the lights to take the right cue, the audio to do the right cue, and for the screen to switch from you to presentation or to logo, whatever the case may be. So communication is really important. Make sure you can communicate with the team properly is super key to what we do in general. A couple of things you guys want to think about when it comes to skill sets for this position really is technical proficiency. We won't dive into that too much, obviously, because we're going to dive into the MIDI part of this. But another one is attention to detail. And it's like I said a little bit earlier with that, verifying that the content you're seeing, that you're ingesting essentially, is example for the right format. Can anybody raise their hand? Does anybody know what the actual preferred codec is for MIDI? It doesn't know. Does anybody know what platform MIDI only runs on?
Anyone?
So the answer to that, yeah, well, the answer is Playback Pro. And if you guys don't know, sorry, not Playback Pro, the answer is the MacBook Pros. They only run on Macs because they're part of what's called the AV community. And AV community is a programming subset from Mac. And this allows you to have more function and flexibilities on a playback software. This is their version of getting playback abilities more advanced, or that work better with the M1 chips, for example, for what they do. So with that knowledge, it already tells you MOV is a good source, but also they prefer haptic or ProRes because these are native to, it works, it's a good source, but it's not native to it. So sometimes verifying the content I'm getting is the right codec for me to play through could be the difference between it stuttering or not playing consistently. So these are things you want to think about when you are problem solving or trying to troubleshoot technical issues on job site. Another thing to think about, or sorry, with attention to details. Another thing to think about is that problem solving skills we just talked about a second ago. When it comes to problem solving, it's being able to adjust on the fly to issues. And one of those things could be having a primary and a backup in place so that when you go from an error to a solve, it's as simple as clicking a button, not a, hey, my whole show crashed. I have no solution to solve this. Stop the whole show, right? That in a live event scenario is death pretty much. So being able to solve those things and communicating quickly to that teammate is how to do that. So real quick, let's go ahead and dive into the PowerPoint here, get you guys a just general understanding of MIDI and kind of how to flow through some of these things. One thing real quick I'll mention is I highly recommend if you guys are going to go down this path of being a playback operator, whether you're going to go MIDI or Playback Pro or Play B or AV Playback or Theatrics Express Q, these are basic video playback systems. Not to exclude Resonum, for example, which would be a little high-end, more of a media service system that does playback abilities, right? If you sit on that lower tier, these are good stepping stones if you can master one of these to get to that next tier, the screen switcher operator or media server operator. Not that you may not want to do that, but this is a good stepping stone to get to those positions to master these. And what I mean by that is really sit down and learn this. Fun fact for you guys, if you don't know about copyright law, the difference between one program and another is 30%. At 30% difference, I can create the exact same product as long as it's 30% difference to what the original is. I don't have any issues with copyright law. And what that means is a lot of the times, and as you guys are noticing right now, like you've noticed probably the last couple of days, what a lot of that means is that the verbiage has been changed a lot of the times, which is a little confusing sometimes, but the fundamentals and the basics are all still there. So we're going to dive into what some of those verbiages are here so that you can connect those to what you are familiar with, so your brain can already process how things are going to work out, not just visually, but also verbally as well. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this PowerPoint here in a second. Again, if I have anybody with any questions, go ahead and take the mic and ask me real quick. If not, we can dive down that rabbit hole. I need to find the screen sharing page, which just blew up on me. All right, cool. So here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and screen share this. And we're gonna do PowerPoint presentation and do a share there. All right, so you guys should all see this. So real quick, a note to this, if you're gonna download this today with your MacBooks, that logo at the bottom left, which would be the left side of there, that is the older software. So if you guys download this today and you see the older version, you're on the outdated version or 1.5 and below. On the right-hand side, 1.5 and above, up to 2.2 right now, that is the newer version. So logos are very, very important here because it tells you the difference between what's current and what's outdated. So just a quick visual for that for anybody who's going to download it today and follow along. Most people are used to seeing, when they're doing this, you're used to seeing this, right? And this is very kind of complicated, but not too much, right? I see over here, I have my time code for my total runtime versus how much time is left. I have my videos here. I have an audio file down here. I have an image of what's playing out on the program side. And then I have a thumbnail of what's going on and some verbiage I can do here. And this kind of looks really complicated, but if we broke this down to a much more simpler way of looking at it, which would be this example here, is very just 4 different key areas to look at. And the first one being on the left-hand side is that playlist and transport area. And what that is, and again, I'll go back here real quick, what that is just where all my video cues are positioned, right? On that left-hand side here. All this is a playlist. And what that means is I can bring in my content here. I can check it real quick with a visual of a thumbnail to make sure that this is the right one. I have a verbiage information here. I have a start time, a total runtime, and then some functions down here that we'll get into in just a second. And then if I have audio playing, I have an example of a VU media here. They're not true, they're digital, so they're not exact, but they are visually appealing to you so that you have an understanding of where you spell at some extent. And we'll get into that a little bit on the hands-on side of this. And then at the bottom here, you have a waveform monitor so you can see where the clipping is. where it's going at. And we can see from this one already where the green is right now, where that player is. I can see that right after this little area that there's some clipping going on. So I may want to instinctively lower that if I haven't done so already on the other end. So again, I'll go forward here. The middle side is what they call the playhead area or the program window. And all this shows you is a visual representation of what is playing out on your output side. And there's multiple ways of what you can play out to, but on the programming side, this is your visualization here. And then on the right-hand side, you have a preview side of what is either current or coming up next of what you've clicked on from the thumbnail side, again, from the playlist. So it's a little back and forth, but there's a reason for that. And once we get into the hands-on, you'll kind of see that a little bit more. And the bottom here is just a down and dirty waveform monitor with a timeline for you so you can go through things back and forth. And when you look at it this way, it's a little bit easier to understand this concept. And again, if I overlay the two images together, we would see this. So playlist and transport, playhead, waveform, and preview. And preview is a little misleading there, but the verbiage, again, is not used by anybody else. So it's better to use this than nothing. But the preview side allows me to get into some of these advanced functions. And when we get to the hands-on portion, we'll dive into that some more. Right now, we'll just dive into a little bit on the playlist and transport side, or that left-hand side. So if I keep going forward here, when you first start opening these up, you should see at least one video, or you're going to see nothing, and you want to upload a video. And again, when we get to the hands-on, I'll show you how to do that. It's a very quick button click. I'll also provide you guys, if you, at the end of this deck here, you'll see some hotkeys you can use. But for this presentation, since we're virtual, I'll try to be as key active as possible on the screen side so you can see what I'm clicking on or how I'm dragging this in without using hotkeys. I'll try to use the mouse as much as possible. Again, you guys have a microphone out there if you want to stop me and ask questions, or if I've gone too fast on something, let me know and I'll go back and show you how you can get that done. But essentially, the first thing you want to look at is these functions right here, which are the most important and the ones you'll get to the most. These are your kind of your hotkeys, your actionable keys. So this first symbol here is called replace cue source. And what this does is if I have a video here, and let's say I have an updated version of this video, let's say a version 2 or version 4 or whatever the case might be, I can click on this and replace this one file in here. And it's really important for what this does because it keeps it in line to the timeline, where above that you can see where that 1 is. That means this is ID 1, essentially. And if I just updated this, instead of having to replace this, drag a new file in and drag it to the top, I can literally just replace the one I have from my folder and now update it very, very quickly. So this is a cool function to have, very, very quick and easy to use. The next one is audio toggle. This is to turn the audio on or off. And this is a really good thing to use on a lot of scenarios where maybe the audio that I have in here isn't what I need, and I just need the visual for, let's say, a background cue, or I brought in something last minute. So you can turn that on or off. And again, you can see it down here at the bottom. And if you haven't realized already, if it is blue or highlighted blue, that means it's activated. If it's in gray, it means it's not activated at all. The next one we have here is beginning, pause at the beginning. And what that means there is that when I initially click on this video, it will be stopped, or it won't just play through. So there's two ways that MIDI does this. And this is where a trap I would say people fall into, is that they'll upload this without knowing about these things, and they'll go to click on this or to activate that section, right, to get ready for the next cue. So my client might say, hey, stand by for main title. I may click on this to stand by on it, and because I don't have this activated, it will now just play through actively, which is not what we wanted at all. And if the audio engineer is relying on you to do your job properly, and he has your mic open on his end, now you've just played an audio file with video that isn't being shown anywhere, which can be distracting. So this is a very good key to put this on at the beginning so that you can activate this thumbnail, go to the general side and type into there without having to play anything out. And the next one we have is fade in ability. So depending on how the video got edited, you could have a fade in already built in, and at that point you don't want to turn this on at all. Or you could do a fade in after the fact. So maybe it pops in real quick with something, but it's not very interesting, and they want it to fade in so that they have a second to go from iMac to video source or PowerPoint to video source, and they want this quick fade of transition to be built into this. Now, word of advice here, though, this does not add fade in ability. This is on top of the existing video. So you're not adding more time to your video. Whatever your 0 point is, it'll be a 3-second fade in from black to video. So a very good point to make about that is that you're not adding an essential fade in ability. You're adding it to the existing video time, but not adding more time to it, essentially. The next one is key to a lot of things, and we'll dive into this a little bit because there's two ways to do this there's two ways to do this that would be beneficial to you guys. There is a cue loop, and on the general side, on the hands-on portion, we'll dive into this, but there's a cue loop of how many times this video will play through itself. So again, I have to have it blue activated, and on the general side or the other side of the screen where it says preview, what I want to do there is I want to tell it how many times I want this video to loop before it just stops. There's another way to do queuing, which we'll get to in a second. or a little bit down this year, we'll get to about how I can link multiple videos together and then play those videos in a certain amount of time frame. Okay. And then the next one we have here is transition to next cue toggle. This enables or disables it. And what this allows you to do is set up a sequence of when this video ends, it goes to the next video. When that video again, it goes to the next video. And you can change. It doesn't have to be in order either. It could be 1, 3, 4, 8, whatever you want, as long as when this is activated and at the end here, which you'll see during the hands-on portion of it, as long as when that happens, you have the ability to change that out on the fly or let it play in a sequence out. And then finally here, you have the fade out ability. Now, technically, a lot of times it's really good to add to the end of a video. The fade out ability, if it's not going to a logo, just gives it a clean indication of what's going on. And you'll see this when we do the hands-on portion here. When you go from 1 to 0, there is still a bunch of milliseconds or 60 milliseconds of time code that needs to run out. That is the difference between cutting too early and cutting too late. And having a fade out ability gives a visual cue, not only as an auditory cue for what you're doing, but also a video cue for the team to essentially switch from, again, your video source to PowerPoint or to iMac or to whatever the next sequence of events is. So sometimes it's really good to add, but again, you have the ability to either add it to a video that doesn't have it. If it goes to logo, sometimes you want to add that in there if other videos are doing that. If it goes to logo and the client says, hey, I wanted to stay in this for a couple of seconds, then you definitely don't want to add that. But again, you have the ability and the control to change that on the fly based on what your needs are for that particular show. And then another key one to put here, which is another fail that I feel people trap themselves into, is pause at the end. So imagine if pause at the beginning and pause at the end weren't activated. What would happen is my video would just play through. So if I didn't have this activated, which it is on now, it is on for this example. If it was off, however, that means at the end of that video, it would go to the next cue and play that video through, which would definitely not be what I wanted to do unless it was part of a looping for the beginning for, let's say, opening doors. I want to have a couple of videos looping a couple times. I would want to have that off. If I'm in show mode, though, I would definitely want to have this on for each one of my clips so that at the end of the clip, it stops there. It doesn't go any further. Also, some of the animations you might get or some of the videos you might get have a logo at the end. If that is the case, then that logo, you want to definitely stop there so the audience can see that for a couple of seconds. And then going forward here, we have Go-To. So Go-To is a very individual functionality. And what that means is that at the end of this clip, assuming I don't have pause at the end on, it'll go to either the next clip or a clip that I've told it to go to by identifying the ID of that. And again, the ID of that will be on the preview side in general, which we'll dive into more on the hands-on portion of that. But these are your basic fast functions here. The only thing we haven't gone over here, which I didn't create a slide for, so I apologize for that. But if you look at the top left-hand corner here, you're going to see this little clip icon or a slate board. That slate board tells me that this is a video that they're using. If you upload a video, an image, a PowerPoint, SciPhone, NDI, those icons will change to match what that is. So it's another visual cue for you to know what my files are very, very quickly. And again, if I've already had these preset up a certain way, or if in settings, I've set up my settings to be a certain way for my default of how I want to run the system essentially, then I can have these lowered or closed out essentially, which will show how that works here in a minute, how that closed out, and I don't have to look at the preview at all, or these active buttons. I just get my titles. And then another note you can make too is you can leave the title as one thing, and again, we'll get into this in a second. Leave the title as one thing and add a memo. So maybe the client's calling this XYZ, but he wants the cues to go off of the screen switcher operator who's got look 1, look 2, look 3, and let's say you're look 4, for example, and anytime he calls look 4, he wants video XYZ to play. You can put that in your notes section so that you're ready for that as well, instead of just having to write it down on pen and paper. So that kind of goes over the basics, quick, down and dirty fundamentals of MIDI and some traps you want to look out for when you're running this program. So if you guys have a laptop in front of you, I recommend going to immunot.com/MIDI. If you go to the Immunot page, they also have another program, which is called Visor. And this is a way to do MIDI and kind of a vMix setting here. And if you guys go to that page here, which again, I know you guys can't because I can see you, you would just click on here. It's a free download. You get it for a certain amount of time period. I want to say it's 60 minutes at a time. It's full access, whatever you need to do. What's really cool also about MIDI for the production side, for corporate, for example, is that MIDI allows you to have 2 keys. So if you want to be a MIDI playback operator and provide this as a service, you could buy MIDI with 1 key for about $400, and you get 2 keys and put this on as a primary and a backup on either machine that you had. All right, so next, when you open up, you would see this window here. And as you can see, I have a file loaded for you guys to kind of follow through with me on. You would just click on New Project for yourself after you downloaded it, uploaded the content, and opened it for the first time. You would see this. It would actually register. You would say Try as Demo, and just click on New Project, and it would open it up. So this is the end of the presentation I have for you. Like I said, very quick and easy, not very complicated. go to me full screen. Before I dive into the actual programming side, does anybody have any questions about what you just saw or anything I've said so far? I'll take that as a no. I see someone saying no. I see one guy talking to somebody else here. I see somebody going away from this. Just kidding. So I will go ahead and dive into the programming side here. I'm going to go in and go to this next computer here, and I'm going to share that screen with you guys in just a moment. So this is MIDI, and this one I've already loaded, and I've gotten up set up here. So this is MIDI on the General Census, and I'm sure everybody can see this. If you can't, raise your hand, and I'll work on it with the team here. But you should be able to see what I have going on here. And again, I've just added a couple of things. So here's a tank face, stare screens. Here's a Dante 1K tone that I created for certain scenarios. FaceTime video. So if I use this one, I double click on it, you can see the camera that I have down here. Also, we go to a web page, you can see this here. And then AVE intro, and then we'll go to the thank you video at the end here. But again, you can see I've already done some pre-stuff here, and this everything looks the same to you here. The only difference right now you're seeing is this ability to go to 2 here. And I'll stay right here real quick because we have tank facet. And we'll see over here, I gotta move this out of my way. I'm gonna close this up real quick. So we have on the preview side, general, subtitles, and closed captioning, geometry, color controls, and transition and fade out. And this is where there's a couple of things you can do here. So what you can't see right now is above this section here where my arrow is, there's what's called files. And in files, you have the ability for a new project, open, or open a recent project, similar to what you just had on the other side when you first created this page. And then here's where you can either with hotkeys, command 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or command shift 1, 2. You can add videos, stills, audio cues, a camera cue, a siphone cue if you have siphone. Real quick, if you guys don't understand the difference between siphone and NDI, for example, siphone is internal to the computer. So this allows systems to talk to each other internally, where NDI also does that. But in addition to doing it internally, it allows you to do it over IP, for example. So you can bring in an NDI feed or bring in a siphone feed. So you can have things talk and play to each other. And you can add a browser queue as well, which we added here already. And then you can add a Windows source queue. So essentially like in OBS, for example, or on vMix, I could add my screen directly to this and share that screen out if I had to for any situation, or I could do this by the network side. And that's how you do that. Save as, these functionalities across the board are universal. And then bundle playlists, which we won't get into, but essentially this is creating a new save format that allows me to play all these in a sequence of events. So that's where our file comes into place. Then we have the edit side. So undo change loop counts. So you can see right now I only have, I believe, one of these loop counts on. So right now it's set to 3, so this would play 3 times before it just stopped. But you could also see that I don't have the play pause at the end. So this would play 3 times and then continue to play until I had this actually activated. And the 3rd time it would stop. I come back up here. So that's a real quick hot way to change that out. If I were to do cut, it would delete this section, or I can copy it and do another one. I could paste in a source if I had to do that. I could paste the match styles. When you say match style specifically, what that is doing is that if this one, for example, had specific settings, so I'm going to hotkey command copy right now, and you can see the ability to come up for paste is there. I haven't changed much on that except for the looping, but the looping has 2 functionalities, which again, we'll dive into a second. And then I can duplicate this file. I can select all my files, start detaching emoji and symbols. I don't have any usage for it, to be honest, so I don't know what they do. Then up top here, I have view. So hide view playlist and transport. So if I click on that, I lose a portion of my screen. Not ideal. So I'm gonna bring that back. If you are using this with a MIDI emulator, which we could talk about in a minute, there are also hotkeys down here, and I can eliminate portions of my screen so that I only see what I need to see down here as well, other than just the hotkeys. All right, and this can actually be handy too when you're doing an emulator and you want to see just playlist, and you're outputting this to a HyperDeck emulator, for example, or to an output that you don't need to see exactly what's being previewed out because you can see it in front of you. So again, I'll go back to the view tab here. I can hide cue preferences, hide waveform monitor at the bottom there, collapse or expand cues, disable auto scroll cues. And again, these are cues here, but I can also do that from here. I can just click on this down arrow here and just see it like this. And again, if I'm confident and my settings have been set already, this is an easy way to run it. Personally, for me, I like to always see what's going on so that if I do any changes or any modifications, I always have a visual at least of what I need to see at, and I can give some kind of indication if I get called on comms about what the next cue is by either name or by notes. And again, I'll go back to the view side here, set cue types, hide cue time for overlay preview. Again, all these abilities are just in the menu side, and I just showed you a couple ways to do that here. Hide rendering frame per second, which goes down to down here, this 60 frames per second. This is just a good reference to show you. I also have my time code up here as well that I can see. And that's display remaining cue time, which would be up here as well, these two as well. and then disable cue end times. I wouldn't do those. I would just want to see that stuff. It's very, very important for when you're doing the shows and having a countdown timer that is reliable to what you're doing. The next tab I have is a cue tab. So rewind current cue, go to 10, go to 20, go to 30. Again, most of these cue options are right up here as well. I gotta move this tab. Yeah, most of these are right up here. So this would be to go full screen or hit Command F. This would be my total time for that track. So I go ahead and click on here and I take this through. I can see it running here, matches to this over here. And I can see how much time is left. And also, this has no audio, which I can tell because the waveform is empty, but I can also see the timeline coming here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop this. Oops, oh, because I have the loop on, so we're gonna go pause. And we're just gonna cue the next one, so let that stop. And I have some abilities here, which I saw as well, which is fast forward, jump to next, jump to previous, rewind, fast forward, and then the ability to either loop continuously or loop the one video here. So real quick, we'll go back to cues. Again, all the same functionalities are there as what I had on the top window there. And we have playlist here. So a couple things to note about the playlist is very important here. A standalone mode is MIDI on its own, taking the internal clock of the computer and running it that way. So if you're in a different time zone, let's say you're in the East Coast and you go do a show on the West Coast and you bring your machines with you and you haven't updated the time zones to that coast, your timing would be different than what's on that coast timing wise. So if you need something to be on a world clock, for example, this wouldn't work. MTC follow mode and LTC follow mode are simply standards, or LTC follow mode is simply standard. MTC is a different follow mode that you can use. However, if you turn these on, you disable some other abilities that are also need timecode of some sort. So typically standalone mode is best. If again, you want to come into that playback operator position and run your own system and have the ability to do, let's say, a data link or a Madwell card to bring in or ingest time code from ArtNet or things like that. Changing this ability here would affect you versus doing it in a different section, which we'll get into in a second. Playlist preferences here. Again, I can see it on the side. And then the same functions that I have here on this side are pretty much here as well. We'll get into panic in just at the end of this. Panic mode is a very, it's a command function. So command escape is what I have a program does now. And there's ways to change what panic mode does. And this again is for those scenarios where something goes wrong. You can hit command mode to go to a certain cue, or to pause the video, or it does fade and pause, or just fade out and do nothing. This can be changed out. A lot of times I recommend you go to fade out and then let the backup take over essentially, or switch that out through the switcher side. Select preview cue. Select next cue. Again, we've gone over these presets here. Which you do with the mouse. It's just by double clicking here or double clicking here. Jump to first cue. Jump to last cue. This is the start or stop of a video, which is they call jump. Jump to previous cue. Jump to next cue. Jump to selected cue. Again, refers to this side of the screen. And then another one we have here is active video outputs. This is just see what's going on. And we'll dive into this in just a moment here. So you have set up video output and set up audio output. We'll go into this after we go into the settings side because I do have some more stuff to show you on that. And then Windows are just generic information about the setting you have here. You have a help section. If you go to Welcome to MIDI, this gives you a little introduction to who they are. You go to documentations. This will take you online. So if you are online and you need help to read the manual, it will not take you anywhere. And then contact support. MIDI has a very good support team. They're very quick to respond, but they are in Hungary, so they're into the time zone than most of us here in the US. So be conscious of that fact that you may not get a response until the middle of the night. Their time, morning, your time, daytime, they'll be sleeping. So just be cautious when you do that, reach out here. And real quick, what we didn't go over yet was MIDI itself, the tab there. And what I want to go to is settings. Now, this portion here is kind of the deep dive of where you can get in here and really fine-tune things. So preferences, and the reason we're going over this portion first here is that preference is the settings or the master settings for the whole system. This tab over here in general, which we'll go over to in a moment as well, this will override what you've done here. So be very cautious of that whatever you do here, think of these as your settings for yourself to run how you want the machine to run, but you can override those individually on each individual file by clicking on the preview side here and overriding the functionalities there. So we'll go over these real quickly here. So playlist again refers to the playlist, which we know is this side here. And I have SMPTE frame rate, which is 30 or 29. This will be based off a standalone mode. If I change that to a different format, to the LTC mode, this gets disabled here and we'll base off of that. Start timer offset is 000 across the board. Again, this is a SMPTE format here of timecode. This will always go this way unless you tell it otherwise. If you wanted to change this, for example, though, it would start all your video cues at XYZ seconds or minutes after the fact, universally for whatever I downloaded after this here, versus it being 000. Fade duration, 1 second, so you can change that from 1 second to 3 seconds, and that would change this fade here and fade here. So typically I would put this at 3 seconds for myself. Oops, 3 seconds here, fade in, 3 second fade duration. And that's where you change that. Transitions, you have dissolve functionality here. Oh, you can't see the setting menus on the screen. I understand. That is not good. Let me see if we can share this differently. So hold on. Let me go here. Here we go. Thanks for the heads up, Doug. So now you guys see what we're talking about here. This is the preference setting here. Thanks, Doug, for letting me know. So when you have playlist here, you have system frame rate, which is based off of SMPTE, and timecode based on SMPTE. Here's your fade duration, transition duration. Now this one is key here, dissolve, and then you have wipe abilities. So wipe right, wipe left, wipe up, down, and ripple. I would never use any of these, but again, you're your own people out there. Do whatever you like. I would always have this dissolve, and again, I can super or override this in the general section or the preview side. Playlist toggle, I can activate or deactivate these, and as a whole, for the whole system, I can either have them on or off completely, so they're not accessible or disabled essentially. And then jump action behavior. So jump action behavior is when I click on something, and again, that goes back to what I said a little bit earlier about if I double click, what does it do? Does it trigger the clip or does it load the clip? And I always want to do a load the clip. If I were to do a trigger a clip, if I double clicked on this on a preview, for example, which we can't see, from the playlist side, it would activate that cue to play automatically. So if you're having that issue where you're double clicking and it's playing out, it is because this functionality is on trigger and not load. So load is what my preferred is. So I can load it in there, and then I will use the space bar to activate that or cue it out. And then you have the panic behavior. So again, command escape is the panic behavior or the dump mode. This is like the oh shit button for you. So you have fade out and pause, fade out and rewind, or fade out and load next. I pretty much use fade out and pause, or fade out and load next, depending on what my show is. I've never had to use fade out and rewind yet, but essentially just as what they say, fade out and pause means that it'll fade and pause exactly where you hit the command escape button. And then the idea is that you would take your backup, which is playing hopefully a couple seconds behind you. You would do that to then continue playing through or switch over on that. Fade out and rewind, you would do to restart the video. This could be useful for rehearsals, but not as accurate. And then fade out and load to next means it would stop, or it'd fade out and it'd load the next cue. You would lose that file sitting there. This could be used more for installations if you had a time code running where you had a certain time frame things ran through, and if something didn't load properly or XYZ, you could just have it so they went to the next video, just kept playing through. And then you have browser source default. So you guys could see on the playlist previously, I had done google.com. You could set this is set of default to be MIDI, so that tells you that I changed it myself, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And then you have default values for new cues. So again, this is overriding or superseding anything you would do on the general side or the preview side if you want to start it this way. And you can, again, activate or deactivate some of these toggle cues you have or the abilities you have on the preview side. Go to audio outputs here. So audio output is a big issue with a lot of different people. This is literally one of the ways you can get to there, or you can do it from the menu side, which we'll get into that in a second. But you have disable audio, which means no audio goes out anywhere. You have system default, which means the computer's default settings. So think about your speakers or think about a headphone jack, for example. And then you have NDI and SDI. So SDI is primarily for Blackmagic, the HyperDeck emulator, or if you're doing it to a Black Deck Link card. That's when you want to use that. And then NDI obviously goes out to NDI feeds or system default by itself. Typically, if you just leave all three of these on, it'll just go out at all times to every single one of those, and you can pick it up one way or another. But system default would be either your speakers or a headphone jack. NDI and SDI would be either an out card for a Magwell card or Blacklight Dink. And this also allows you to activate the HyperDeck emulator. And then you have some other options here to be more direct. So Micro Pro speakers. I have a program called Cinemaker Audio Devices. It would route to that. I have the NDI only audio option, and I have VB cables here as well, and then Zoom audio device as well. So I can route my stuff directly to Zoom call if I was linking to a Zoom or siphoning this out to a Zoom, for example, or I could just do system default NDI, which will blast on all sources. This system default, I will say though, doing NDI and SDI, the caveat to that would be that you are eating up more CPU processing. So if you don't have a bunch of heavy 4K video content, you're probably okay. Most of these are either 720 or 1080. So I'd be okay with this setting. But if you had more heavy duty content that's 4K, maybe they're 30-minute videos, and it's bogging down your MacBook Pro for whatever, you might want to change your audio settings to free up some of that CPU abilities, or sorry, the GPU ability to give you more power to run your content. Output channels, you usually get 2 to 16. If you set these to change these out, which I won't do right now, it will reset or reboot your machine in order to change the settings for that. And then you have the output routing abilities. I only have 2 here. If I had more than that, I would have more abilities here to change out left and right, for example. Master volume here particularly pertains to the master of everything. Whenever you change this, I'd highly recommend to use auto normalization. And what this means is that if my master volume is negative whatever, let's say it's negative this right now, and I hit enable, which I always have on, what that does is that every video that comes in, it tries to auto-analyze it and make it the same level. So some of you might remember if you're playback operators and you go through all these videos individually for rehearsal, or after rehearsal, you spend a couple minutes with the audio engineer to really fine-tune these levels. This is a way to help you speed that process up and get you more to play by just uploading and downloading content. And then you have what's called extended mono files. So I always put this onto stereo. You could have an off or 2 all. And what 2 stereo does specifically in MIDI is that it turns any mono file into a stereo file. So it'll automatically give you left and right channels. It'll be 2 monos, obviously, but it'll be in stereo format. So this is very good to have on always. And then if you're doing a Zoom event, or you're doing or pretty much a Zoom event or anything else virtual, and you're going somewhere and there's an audio delay coming from you, you can do the audio delay on your side versus having the audio engineer do it. Doing this though is a little bit tricky. It is by milliseconds. Typically, I would let the audio guy do this in general, but if you can figure out where you land millisecond-wise, you could modify that on your end versus having to do it on their end. But again, this is very, very tricky because it could be an issue somewhere else, not just from your side. Then you have mats and overlays. Again, this is an ability for primarily the HyperDeck to create a green screen ability so that you can do overlays when you bring in the emulator to, a HyperDeck emulator to bring in, let's say, lower thirds or keys like that. It'll send out this. You can do a Chroma Key on the Blackmagic side. Then you have subtitles and CC. Unfortunately, I can't show you more than what this shows you here, and we'll have another tab as well that won't be activated. I don't have a cart or an SRC ability in my system at the moment, so I can't really show how this is active, but what this section does here is it tells you what the font color would be, a background color, which right now is transparent, and then font size and font family. This would be activated, though, on the general side, which will show you there where that is. If I had a cart or SRT, this will look for that source and superimpose it onto your content if you have it available, and you can turn them on and off per input, or you can have it on the entire time. And then you have integration here. So integration, again, is for that trigger with ATEM. I highly recommend, if you're going to do that, to do a manual IP. It works a lot better than doing the USB way of doing this. That way you put your MIDI on, ATEM switcher on a IP address, you put the controller on an IP address, and then you put this on an IP address that matches on a network, and this will all talk to each other, and it'll show up. And what's really, really cool about this is on the emulator side on ATEM, which I don't have here to show you. On the ATEM side, your playlist will show up in your emulator, so you can just play it from there directly and give it cues. Unfortunately, I don't have anything plugged in as it's trying to connect here, so none of these functions will show me too many options. But if I had an ATEM on the programming side, I have some functionality here to activate a button here for load next cue, pause, or rewind, so I can activate these directly, and then I'd have the ability to change that here as well. You do need to turn on the emulator for it to talk to each other. So if I disable this here, as you can see, it's not going anywhere. And then trigger by NDI, you can also enable NDI triggers. So if I'm running NDI, for example, and I want to run this through their proprietary software side, I can enable that and it'll do it as well. So NMC is how you would do is how you do director and actor. Try to get my verbiage right here. Director and actor is how you would do this. NMC is a proprietary language that MIDI uses for its program, particularly for when they have MIDI and Visor, which is their VJ software essentially that works with MIDI. This is their program. If you want to do a primary backup, you would need to use this. Unfortunately, I don't have anything plugged into this. I don't have another MIDI for it to talk to or to enable it. What you would need to do is once you have both of these on the same network, is enable this as the output. This becomes the director, and the other one becomes the actor. And what this does is this sends out a ping for that one to see it, and then in sources you would see that, and you would activate this, and then you would have a director and actor scenario where you have a primary backup that play off each other. This does not transfer data as far as video goes. You still have to load videos separately, but it does do it gives commands so that if my playlists are the same exact thing, if I go to next, it goes to next. If I play, it plays. And then on that scenario, you might want to go to playlist and do a delay here so that all of my backup system plays 3 seconds later on the delay versus my primary one. So instead of me having to do it here, this is a way to automate that. But you need to enable the director's machine needs to be enabled in order to be discovered by the actor's side. And then you have the typical OSC and UDP controls. So you have an on-screen controller, software, or any of the other scenarios. You can enable that here and find that. I don't have anything plugged in here, so nothing to show. But again, you can enable it here. MIDI controls. MIDI controls you have as well is an ability to control this with something else. For example, I think you guys can still see me. I've been able to use my APC. I've controlled it with this before. I've gotten this up and running before in the past with this, with Resolume, with VMix, a couple of different scenarios, primarily for the auto controls here and the ability to just hot punch to something I want here. So these are really cheap, relatively $80 at the time. USB out, work pretty well. Just program them, no big deal. Again, we'll keep going down the list here. So if you have a DMX controller, you can, again, I don't have anything plugged in for this, but you would want to do it on the Wi-Fi side, or sorry, you want to do it on the interface side. You can do Wi-Fi as well. But DMX controller or ArtNet is primarily for a lighting system to be able to control yours. And you can control, once you have it plugged in here, you can activate Learn here, and they can press a Q here, and it'll, on a lighting controller, whether it's a Hog, not ArtNet, sorry, whether it's a Hog, a Grand MA, or an ETC lighting console, you can, they can learn, or MIDI can learn what button they're going to press to activate these cues essentially, so that you can do it that way. Again, so there is time codability here. If you're not in standalone mode, there are some drawbacks. We were talking about the CPU, GPU side of that. Some of the other drawbacks as well is that if you were doing timecode inputs, you would lose some of the abilities to do an LCT source. You would lose some of the abilities to override what's being sent from timecode on the individual journal settings here, which we'll get into after this section here. And then transcoding. So transcoding folder is if you can create, or if you, again, run the system on your own, you can essentially create your own folders that will automatically transcode whatever you jump into this. And there's another way to do that on the fly as well, which will show you. But essentially, I can create a folder so that everything is transferred to either haptic or ProRes automatically, or I can do this on the fly each time I open the program. And then the last thing here is deinterlacing. I can have this ability on or off, and this is just a way to lessen or reduce the bandwidth of something I'm trying to push up. And finally, we have miscellaneous. So beta updates, I usually don't ever have those on because I don't want to be the test guy for anything. Mode open is standalone, but if you are in an installation scenario, or if you are in a scenario where you have timecode abilities, you can set it to open up with that in here. And again, remember, everything in preference is the default or the back end of how this activates and turns on. Auto start playback on option, activate output on open. I would never enable that as well. Disable, confirm, quit. Prevent display mirroring, that's enabled here. And then reset warnings. Reset warning is useful, but if you have a crash, you will automatically, when it reopens, MIDI will automatically ask you to send a report, and it's up to you to send that report. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this here. So my screen sharing is paused at the moment. Let me go ahead and stop here, and I will, again, give it a second here. Does anybody have any questions about what we just went over? I know we're ingesting a lot of information here. If we're still good, I'll keep going. Thumbs up? All right. I'm going to go back to sharing the MIDI side here, and let's dive into some of these other functionalities here. So we're back on the MIDI side here. Doug, again, just let me know if I'm missing anything. I believe everybody can see this here. So I'm going to click on the star screen here. And if I hit play here, sorry, I double-clicked on it. If I hit play here, it'll play out this video clip. I hit space bar here is what I just did to stop that. And on the right-hand side here, you see these general information here. So general information, what's really important about this part is if my client says, hey, I want to see movie star screen, and he's calling this airplane. Let's just say he's calling airplane. I can modify that here, and it'll automatically change here. So it doesn't matter what the original name was, or I could have left it there and I could have made a note for myself. He calls it airplane. All right, I can make a note about that. And then here you can see that where ID is set on 2. Believe that where it is. ID set on 2 references this ID here. And I can change that color to any other color. So if I wanted to group these together for a certain reason, maybe this is the red's morning session, yellow's afternoon session, green videos are evening session. I can do it that way if I wanted to, or I could do just organized loop videos versus non-loop videos. I highly recommend when you're doing loop videos, upload multiples of the same file. And we'll get into that in just a second, why that's kind of important here. Then you have your in time and your out time, which again, I can modify when this starts, essentially, and when this ends, if I want it to be different than what I have. So think of that as a way to cut up your footage
but you need to do it in simply timecode. So it's hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. And then you have play count for looping. So obviously on this file, I don't have it activated right now, but if I did, it would play 3 times. And typically if it's on 0, it's playing infinite. If I activate this, it'll just keep playing and playing and playing over and over again. And then you have the go-to functionality like I have on the top one here for tank facets. If I were to go to, I can go to any one of my already existing cues, and once it ends, it'll jump to that video. And then again, I can make a sequence of that. So a good way to do some stuff would be to do, let's say, dragging this up top. Just not change this to 3. I could click on all 3 of these. And sometimes what will happen is this one, I'm going to right click here. Oops, sorry. Highlight these again. I'm going to right click on this, and you can see my make stimulus loop is deactivated here. So I could make one loop here. It's deactivated because I already have one activated here. So it won't let me do that. But another way to do this would be to just do it manually, which gives you a little more control. I can do 2. So this will jump to 2, and then this one could jump to 3. And then 3 could jump to 1. And now I've created a loop of these 3 videos that'll just jump from 2 to 3 to 1, and 3 back to 1. And there's a loop infinitely until I say otherwise. So I'll take these off so they don't pause. And I'll make sure that I don't have any, see this has a count of 3, so that wouldn't work out. Put that on infinite. And now these 3 sequences here will play until I tell it otherwise. And then I have again, remember I have those visual cues all the time. So here's an audio file. So this one has audio on it, and I don't want to play that out. So if I click on this, it takes me there, right? Because that's my jump. I hit spacebar to play it through, and I see the audio playing there. But I don't want it to play out, so I'm going to disable this. And now there's no audio playing out. I still see the ability here, and I still see information, right? So frame rate, the codec. I have down here the duration, the dimensions, the location where it is in my folder. And another thing I could do here is I could right-click it again with the mouse. I could right-click, and I can go to transcode to ProRes and transcode to HAP. So if I'm in a scenario where this video is having problems, it's lagging, it's jittering, it's maybe just not doing something properly, and I've maybe gone to Handbrake and changed things out already, what I could do is I can just go to transcode to ProRes, and it'll help make that video file essentially more specific to what MIDI wants. Not that it doesn't play it through, but it could help you in whatever scenario is going on. And that's part of that, back to what we said earlier about being proficient and technical in what you're doing. So these are quick ways to do this. HAP takes a lot longer to do. It's a lot more friendly codec for media servers. This is a really big important thing for like Touch Designer, for example. But ProRes is just native. It's what Playback Pro likes. Movie or QuickTime Player is obviously Mac specific, but it has been kind of discontinued at this point. So ProRes is the preferred go-to for everything. And you guys can see as I was talking about that, this has been looping through already because I didn't stop it. So it's just going through and through. I'm going to go ahead and hit this and take us back off to the next thing and let it load through. So again, we've gone over this general section here. I'll give a second here and look at you guys. If there's any no questions, I'll keep going through. So I'll get rid of general there. And then subtitles and closed captions. Again, I showed you in the settings side where to do that. I don't have anything in here for this, so I can't activate it. But if I did, it'd be in this section here. I'm going to close it down. And then you have geometry. And this is just a way to resize things on the fly. So a couple things to note. I have scale to fit, scale to fill, stretch to scale, and then on scale. And essentially, these are quick, down and dirty. It does all the math for you. You don't have to think about anything. And then I have the option which says origin, center or top left. So if anybody's ever done any work with graphics or editing or any kind of software like that, center means center of the screen. So if I go here, I'm going to unlock these real quick just so you guys, actually, I'll keep these locked together. It'll change together. So this is center of the screen. So that's ideally where that is. And I can go scale to fit. Oh sorry, because I'm modifying it here. If I go to up here, I'm going to go to reset all parameters. If I go to upper left-hand corner, this is referring to that 0 point in editing. Okay. So again, I'll go this way, and it'll edit that direction. And this again refers to that 0 region of a graphic. So I'm gonna come back here, reset all parameters. I'm gonna go back to center because that's typically what you want to do. And if I unclick this lock here, I can scale horizontally or vertically. And then I have positioning. So let's say, for example, this doesn't happen as too much. Back in the day, you had a Image Pro, let's say, or a Screen Pro. And what these do is they're scalers, they're built-in scalers, and they might have an issue with maybe the Screen Pro or the projector or something you're playing to directly has an issue. What I can do is I can move this by pixel. So this is percentage here, not pixel count for scaling, but your positioning is pixel count. So I can move this position X by X amount of pixels, or I can move position Y by X amount of pixels. And this could be the difference sometimes between being on point or being just slightly off. And this gets really, really critical with some clients in their content if they have a lot of content right at the edges. And then also I can rotate that here, which I could also do on the video output side if I wasn't to rotate an image. Maybe something that I have doesn't fit properly and I want to just rotate it on the fly. I have the ability to do it here. Again, I'll come back here and I can reset all parameters. And then you have cropping ability. So crop left, pretty simple. Just a note here real quick, if no one's realized, this means that this is transparent here, so it'll play through something. If you're setting on an alpha channel, for example, this will be in front of whatever that alpha channel will be. This would just be completely transparent. Now, so I'm going to bring this back down. Crop from the bottom, same example. Crop from the top, and crop from the right. So that's pretty much all the abilities you get there. And if for whatever reason it's a little bit smaller, you can do a quick reset there. And then you have the abilities on the fly to reset all your parameters here: scale, position, rotate, crop. So reset all parameters. Go ahead and close that out. You have color controls. So real quick, when it comes to color control, there's a couple things I want to make a note of. So you have hue here, you have saturation, you have vibrance. And there's a confusion sometimes on how people think about this. When it comes to hue, hue is all the primary colors on the scale. So essentially, if I go from 0 to the right, I'm going to start, well, let's do it this way. I'm going to go to my camera here, so you guys can see me now. I have this camera here and another camera down here, which is why I need the other camera. But if I go to hue, you'll see my colors change, right? And I'm at 14 right here. This is the first color on the spectrum. It's going to go all the way over to the end. I'm going to go through all the primary colors, and then I'm going to hit back to 0, essentially. And you can see at like 160, 170, right? I'm kind of a red tint here. So if I go now this way, again, this is just a straight line, and I go the other way, that first hit I get, that first couple numbers, that first 10, is that red kind of purplish tint, and then purple. And then again, we'll go this way real quick. That first color I get is like this yellow greenish tint. If I go this way, all the way to the end, I get back to that greenish yellowish tint here. So it's not, I'm going from one spectrum to the other. It is the same spectrum. 0 is where you're starting from. All right, and then I can go up here and I can hit reset all parameters, or reset hue, saturation, vibrance, reset brightness and contrast, or reset the opacity. Let's go over these real quick. So in saturation, right here, I look pretty decent, but if I wanted to add, let's say, some more pigmentation or more reds to my skin tones, I can amp this up a little bit. Now I've got a little bit of tan, right? Like maybe I've been to the beach too much. And you can see my shirt still has a nice color here. And as I keep going here, my skin color, right? That reds and saturations keeps changing because I'm essentially taking color within one spectrum and really just saturating that section of color. So I'll bring this back down, but I kind of don't look that good anymore. So I'm gonna add a little bit of a tan back to me here. Got a tan here. How does the other camera probably look? Got a little bit of tan here, right? I'm gonna go a little bit higher. Now vibrance, this takes those duller colors. So let's think about the colors behind me that haven't been amplified too much. And I can change that here, and it will affect me a little bit, but not as much as the back colors. So if you look at the background now, I'm introducing all this noise because the vibrance is trying to create color where essentially this would be dull. As I take it away, you see that noise in the image kind of disappears, which is, look at the whites here. So if I go all the way max that, you can see all this noise here, right? That's, again, being part of that operator skill set. If I take it back down to 0, it goes away. Now, the other part, too, to think about with saturation is if I go the complete opposite direction, I lose all color. So now, like I'm in a NOR film, and if I wanted to add or take away to this, I could take away vibrance, which see doesn't affect too much. So when you do vibrance with no color, because there's nothing to represent there, it's not trying to highlight the neutral colors, essentially, or the secondary colors. It doesn't work too well. So again, I'll go and reset that. And again, I've only ever used this setting really for cameras when I'm doing something like this. I'm not putting somewhere. Then you have brightness and contrast. And a lot of people have a misconception of this. So if I go on brightness here and I raise this up, you'll see the screen gets kind of washed out here. I'm adding more white levels, essentially. And if I go to contrast, I'm affecting the blacks. So see my shirt now, adding contrast, it's affecting the black region here. And as I add more, it affects, versus if I take it away, you can kind of back to that white zone here. So those are really what those do. And I have an image here, which I won't show you because it makes sense, I think, what I talked about. If it doesn't make sense, I have a visual to show you guys between hue, saturation, and light brightness. But I feel like we did a pretty good presentation here. So if you need it, raise your hand and I'll show you the other image of that. If not, we'll keep going forward. And I see no hands up, so we'll keep going forward. Color controls, audio outputs here. So again, this section here will supersede, let me get my face out of here, now you should double me. This has no audio. All right, so audio output here, this will or supersede the preset settings you've done in your preferences. This will override whatever those settings are. So I could have this at 100. I could have this at XYZ variable. Essentially though, but this allows me to override that functions. So project default means whatever I did a preference, or I can do a custom one and change this to whatever I want it to be outside of what it was set for preferencing. And then again, I have those abilities for auto here. And I didn't do this ahead of time, and I apologize. If I were able to add more channels, which it'll reboot the whole system, you would see more of those options here, and I can route those to different locations. And then finally, we have transition and fade out. So again, now I have the default one. I have the default one here. We're almost done here. I promise, Doug. I got a default one, which is dissolve. Again, I can override those sections here. And then I have fade duration here, which again, I can change that on the fly here. And then that pretty much covers everything you need to know on the MIDI side. The last thing I want to show you guys here is back on the output side. When you go to system video outputs, this is a cool function. Let me see if I can open up. You guys can't see it yet. So let me see if I open up this one. Yeah, okay. So system video outputs, let me just share this with you guys real quick. All right, last thing I'll show you guys real quick is system video outputs. So right now we have a make of a 2 output, so think left and right, or I could do a 3, which would be 3 outputs. Right now I only have 2 things plugged in, but so there's 2. I can do default resolutions here, and I can go to the advanced section here and change these out individually. 19 by 1080, or change this out to a 2x2 grid, which add 4 screens there. All right. One thing to show here real quick is when you do a display test card, which we'll go into in a second on the other deck. When we do a display test card, this sends out an image that we'll go through over in just a second. I have display across outputs, which means it goes off both outputs, and I have edge blending ability here. Edge blending is a little bit tricky because this is based off of the total number. So 600 would be the total for both sides, 600 by 600 crossed over. I'll show you something for that in a second. And then I have the ability to pick which screen gets what. So right now, obviously, I just have my 2 plugged in here. And then down here, which is the most important part, is the warp perspective and warp linearity. So warp perspective, if I grab this 4 corners here, essentially, keeps everything within that range. And if I disable edge blending, you can see that side there. Does everything within that range. And this is really good for on-the-fly kind of projection stuff. But if I went to warp linearity would be for screens that just need a simple corner warping, very quick and easy. Warp perspective, though, would change out my perspective. So that essentially this image could go into a box, and that box would look properly to the visual eye outside of this situation. So very similar to what Reslim does, for example, or Media Mapper or Pixel Mapper or Module M, for example. That's where these come into play. Reset all corners, gets me back to 0, 0. And that's really the kind of the cool advanced functionality of this. When you're doing power down, your power is between 1 and 2, and you can kind of vary that. And what that really is the gamma curve, which is an X cross like this. That gamma curve is really just more about how much of that from 0 to 600 pixels is going from 100% light all the way to 0 light. What's that curvature going on? And that's really what you can do there. So if you were on a pinch and you had to do a mapping, for example, somewhere, and you had MIDI, you could do a 2 projector blend output, do a blend on it, and it's relatively good. I highly recommend that you do 600 pixel overlap. This 600 number here is based off a pixel count. The power here, or the width here, is based off a pixel count. The power is based off of a gamma curve essentially. So I'll go ahead and stop this one here. And then real quick, I know we're about to run out of time. I'm going to go over just one more thing with you guys on this deck here, just to give you a representation. If you don't know what this is, I saw you guys did some projection stuff here. So if you get into that upper end of projection where you're doing more advanced stuff, like warping, blending, or curvatures, some things you want to think about real quick is pretty much what I'm going to show you in this PowerPoint. And let me make sure you guys can see that. Stand by. All right, so you guys can see that. So this is an example of an ultra wide screen, 3040 by 1080. That 600 pixel overlap we talked about earlier. This is what it would look like. And that would be 300 pixels on one side, 10 pixels on the other side, which makes 600 total pixels, which makes your new resolution 3550. So again, I'll go over that just real quick visual there for you. And then keep going forward here. So this is what a normal output would look like if you had one of these. The key thing to think to here is the circles. The reason projection is used circles, and the reason this is such good for MIDI, is that a circle is a circle is a circle. No matter what resolution you're doing, no matter what aspect you're doing, a circle will always look like a circle. It should never be an oval or any other shape. It should just be a circle. And to show you more of that, here's again a wide screen with no information on it. And here's the blend zones going on. And what you'd want to have happen here is you'd want to match up those circles so that they're perfectly aligned, and your blend zone would be equal to that. And then a representation of circles. So this is what I mean by circle to circle to circle. You can see these are 4 of the exact same images all lined up together, which make a perfect circle. If I had any kind of warping or geometry going on where it didn't line up, it would look like this. And if it's not a circle, it's not a circle. You can see at the bottom here, I've cropped it a little bit. The top here, my circles are fine, but they don't line up properly to the bottom circles because there's been some sizing going on and some differences. So MIDI's test pattern, I highly recommend you use it when you can because it will show these circles, and these circles are very, very important. I'll go back real quick to this one. It shows you circles so that if you have to line up multiple projectors, you can line them up. This is a super big, important key across the board. But anyways, I know I'm right about edge of time here. So if there's any questions, I think you got like 5 minutes.
We do have 5 minutes, so that's why we wanted to wrap you up. And so let me ask Omar, see if we got any questions out here. Guys, any questions? Any questions, thoughts? Okay, Tom, hold on. Let me bring it over to you.
Hey, Omar, thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Several months ago, I worked a show where I was using QLab. How does MIDI compare to QLab, and why would you suggest one over the other?
Yeah, so all right, so here's my personal opinion about QLab. I like QLab. QLab is a great program. QLab, I think you're doing a disjustice to it. If you're just playing back video content or audio content, QLab is not, what MIDI does is basically just takes a video at 1920 or 4K or 2K, whatever the measures, and sends it out, right? What QLab, though, is allows me to do much more advanced timeline sequencing, much more advanced audio. If I were to do audio with MIDI, it wouldn't be as clean, and that functionality I have is different. So QLab is a great product, but if you're doing it for playback, you're underserving what its real value is. It does 10 times more than that. And yes, it's a small segment that it can do, so you can totally do that. And if you own QLab and you're using it to just advance your knowledge and your workflow of it, by all means, keep doing it. But if you're using it as a substitution for a playback system, you're doing a disservice to that playback system because it does so many more things than just that. That this is what MIDI's for, essentially, right? It's just the playback from point A to point B. Nothing special about it, nothing more advanced. You have a few functionalities that are more advanced, like the output side, the blending and the dual outputs. But beyond that, it doesn't do anything else, right? It focuses on just video, whereas QLab does this and so many more things that if you're doing it for that, I mean, really, there's a plethora of other options you can use it for. It's more suited to do. Not that it can't do playback. It's totally able to do that. But I just think, it's like I knew a lot of New Yorkers like to use that program. I think you're just doing a disservice to that program because it's doing a fraction, not even a quarter of what it can really do. So that's my 2 cents on that. I have nothing against QLabs. I think it's a great program, especially for doing audio side of things. MIDI would not be a good replacement for that. But if you're doing just video for it, again, it does it a good job. If it's something you own and you operate with and you run with, by all means, keep doing it. But MIDI is, if you're just a solely playback guy, MIDI is the way to go.
Very good, very good. Any other questions? Hold on. Harold, question?
Thanks for your time, Omar.
Of course.
So does MIDI have like a preview before the actual playback, before it actually plays in the room from all the assets that you built into the show? Can you preview it like live before it actually goes live? And then my second question would be, what's your strategy for like a naming convention when you're bombarded with so many assets from the clients? Is there a certain way that you organize that within the software?
Yeah, so we'll go with the first one with the first question, which was, I forgot. No, I'm just kidding. The first question, we'll tackle that one. When it comes to, I just forgot the first question. I'm sorry. So the first one again?
The first question was on if you could preview before you play out.
Right. The answer is no. Simple answer is no. You get a thumbnail. You can preview it in the program side and not send out a signal. But once you're sending out screen full time, there is no way to preview it. That's just part of that. Again, the due diligence at the beginning, but getting those files and make sure they play properly, and just in there. There is no way to preview it. You could disable from the upper right side. You can disable the full screen output and watch the videos there. But once you're in show mode and you've got it, you can't really preview anything. So that is kind of a caveat. The idea with that, or the reason they did it that way, is so that you would play that off something else first and then bring it in or ingest it after the fact. To your second question, what was the second question? Strategy. Oh, okay. So I think it was strategy for organization. Is that right?
Naming the what?
Yeah. So strategy for organization. So what MIDI does that I like a lot is it gives you those number tabs, one through whatever. Also, let's say, like for this example, I had 7. It tells me what the numbers are here. It gives me a name off of that. And typically what I want to always do when I'm on job site is I want to verify right off the bat, hey, this is video 1. It's called XYZ. Is that right? On the paperwork, is that right? What you're going to call it? If they're not going to call that, I'll just I don't care enough. I'll just change the name and call it a day. If you're going to call it this, it's called this. This is called here. I'll make a note of it. I'll make a note in the memo of the original name, and I'll call it what they're going to call it. I don't want to have to think about too much when I'm in show mode. I want to make sure I have exactly what they want. So for me, that was really big key. The other thing too is to your point, like when you're in the hot seat and it's already going, that's why you have that primary and backup situation so that you can work on one to do one thing while the other one's doing a show mode. That's where you kind of need the 2 machines. And that's what I think is so beneficial about MIDI. MIDI gives you that ability to have a primary and a backup when you buy the license right off the bat. So $400, you get 2 licenses, you can run 2 machines. You just need to purchase the Mac essentially, which is the big investment. But as far as that goes, for me, having that sequence there and the ability to just drag and drop to change it out or change the ID out to whatever I need is really useful. And then the other thing I'll do is I also, like I mentioned in the beginning with the colors, I will do colors for like opening sequence or opening session or afternoon session or evening session. I'll do color code the whole system. Or another thing I'll do too is if it's a lot, like 12 plus files and it's just a ton of files and I can't see them all the time or the monitor I have is too tiny, I will make multiple day sessions. So I'll make a session for the morning, a session for the evening, a session for the afternoon, and I'll just open up different files so that I have just what I need, and then I'll drag into what I need. One thing we didn't get to cover here was I can input with a hotkey, Command I for inputting items from desktop, or I can literally just drag and drop, or I can do that one button where I can replace files. And it's pretty seamless and it's pretty quick, so I've been able to do that a lot of times. If I didn't answer all your questions, let me know. I'll go back. Cool.
About the functionality of the free download, how far can you go on that without having to have the license?
Full control you can output. You can output in your timed, I think, to 60 minutes per time, or it's 10 minutes. It's something short, but you have full control to do whatever you want. You just can't output, and you're on a time frame, and it'll shut down. You have to start it back up again.
Does it give you a warning before it shuts down?
Yeah, you have like a timer that goes off, and it'll say, shut down, blah blah. But it's not long enough to do a show with, so.
I'm sure that's by design. All right, well, listen, I think we're going to wrap this up. Omar, I mean, you're a rock star. Obviously, you know the stuff inside and out. I just wanted to give you a chance to take a breath. You've been talking so much. I didn't know if you even
I was
took a
hoping for
breath.
questions. That's why I was like, please ask the questions. So I can take
I
a
mean,
breath.
you wouldn't believe this guy's in Florida. You'd think he's in New York or he talks so fast. But I'll take one more final question. If there's any other final question before we wrap up. All right, Omar. I mean, you have dazzled once again. You're a rock star, man. So next time you come up, you got to see everybody. We'll invite them all back, and then we'll feed you some of the pizza. We had like 800 pizzas here the other day. We'll save you some. Come on back up.
Get me out of the hurricane. That'd be awesome.
Listen, thank you very much, everybody. Put your hands together for Omar Colom of AV Education.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
All right, Omar, we'll talk to you soon. We're going to wrap up this session here at Pirate University. And Omar, we'll see you soon. Guys, we're good on that side? Okay, and guys, we're going to take about a 5-minute break or so, and then Will's going to give you some instructions so that we can reset for our final show of the day. Okay? We need you to get up a little bit, move around a little. So let's get you up.